And here's one of the things about the mystery of D.B. Cooper that is so consistent. The mystery is fast. I mean, it's hard not to just be like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
And you find that really quickly, you either want to be him, find him, or fuck him. Exactly.
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hey, welcome. When my guest, TV and voice actress Maile Flanagan, assigned me the HILF D.B. Cooper, I went in knowing only the headline, that he was a mysterious skyjacker who parachuted away with a cash ransom. By the time we recorded this episode, however, I had joined many before me in following this story down a rabbit hole of intrigue, mystery, and suspense. Join us as we go through what happened that fateful night in 1971 and some of the most tantalizing suspects in this, the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. I'm glad to have you along for this episode of HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody. Let's get started. It's not exactly what they did in my high school.
No.
I understand.
It's for moms. I mean, this is for your mom, right?
For
Broadcast.
My mom she still shudders every time I use the F word, but I can tell it delights her. I know that deep down she's just like, oh, you're so naughty. It's so not my problem anymore.
Right.
Yeah, this is
You're
great.
off in the world. Get out.
Exactly. I am delighted to introduce this episode's special guest, the illustrious Maile Flanagan. Hi, Maile.
Hello. How are you?
I am really good, thanks. I have coffee. My daughter's out of the house.
The dog's locked up.
The dog's locked up.
Everything's put away, people. The knives are locked up.
Can you stay? Maile, don't leave. Don't leave. Now, I did a little history on you.
Oh, God.
Maile Flanagan, born 1965 in Honolulu, Hawaii, and graduated from high school from the Department of Defense High School in Munich, Germany.
Yeah, exactly. I went to a bunch of schools. We moved around a lot. So born in Hawaii, moved to Florida, back to Hawaii. That was when I was before 3 even. Then moved to Bangkok, and I went to elementary school there. Then we left Bangkok and went to Nuremberg, and then left Nuremberg and went to Munich, where I graduated high school. And then my parents stayed there while I flew to Boston for college. I went from college to sleeping in my sister's chair in D.C., a fold-out chair. And
So it was a nice chair.
Yeah, nice chair.
Don't get the wrong idea. It's a really nice chair.
And then I moved to Minneapolis, and I lived there for a long time. And then I moved here, like Los Angeles,
1996,
yeah.
according to your...
Yeah.
And when you moved here, you had a lot of luck right away. And one of your first things was a show called The Bad Seed that you did with some mutual friends.
Yeah.
And you got a big... you won an award in LA Weekly.
Yeah, we
kind of got it.
We couldn't believe we won. And we were so fresh. It was like, oh my God, we're against the Actors Gang.
Yeah.
Which is with Susan Sarandon and what's her husband?
Hacks.
Yeah. Hacks.
You went on. I mean, a lot of people may recognize you as the voice of Naruto. That's a huge... You started that in 2005. You've been the voice of Naruto for 15 years.
Yep.
Terry Perry on Lab Rats.
Yep, for 5 years.
So your voice is probably the most familiar thing, I suspect. Do you find that when you're out in the world and you speak, that people do a double take because of your voice?
It's so weird. I used to say no. And then oddly, during the pandemic, of all things, I think maybe because people are at home and they watch a lot of YouTube stuff and they watch the cons that I go to, maybe Q&As, because I'm recognized for Naruto a lot more than I used to be. I went to this random gas station in Van Nuys, right? Like, I didn't even know it was there, but I literally had no gas. I was like, crap, let me go in here. I had on sunglasses and a mask, and I was paying in cash, and the kid, he's like this... young Latinx kid, and I made a little crack to him, and he goes, "Are you the voice of Naruto?" I'm like, "Yeah." How could you possibly tell that? And he's like, "I don't know.
I'm a big fan."
So I went back to my car and I found a headshot, and
that's cool.
yeah, I keep a few in there usually.
I think that's so cool. Well, and it's also I mean, you've been doing it for 15 years. And it's not only a show, it's the video games. It's
Yeah,
all of the stuff.
movies.
And you go to cons, movies. I mean, Mad TV, Desperate Housewives, ER, Grey's Anatomy, The Office, Shameless, Modern Family.
Yeah,
I mean,
Shameless I had a
you're
big part on, yeah.
huge.
Mhm.
And you live with your wife, Lisa, here
That's right.
in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Well, Maile Flanagan, how honored I am
you.
to have you. And you, ooh, girl. Your assignment for me. Oh my gosh. I was so excited. I was so excited. So Miley assigned me D.B. Cooper.
Yeah.
Oh, and when she first assigned it, it was so great because you said, it's Cooper. What's the name? That guy, that hijacker. You were kind of searching for the word.
Yeah.
And that is like, no, you didn't do any research since then, right?
Oh, no,
you
I
didn't
purposely did not.
Oh, I'm so excited. This particular history is just already so fuckable. I mean, it's just such.
It's an entree size.
It's an entree. I mean, it comes into the room wearing nothing.
Yeah.
And just
there's
the
no
trench
mistaking
coat.
it.
There's no trench coat on this one. It's just straight nips. So DB Cooper. Here's sort of the quick and fast of what happened. What are we referring to when we even say the name DB Cooper? Yeah. DB Cooper is the alias used by a man who hijacked a plane the day before Thanksgiving, November 24th, 1971. He actually signed his name Dan Cooper. Dan Cooper was the alias he used when he signed in. He bought the plane ticket for $20 cash.
What?
$20 cash. It's 1971. Wow. It was a 37-minute flight from Portland to Seattle.
Oh, really?
On a 727. And it's the day before Thanksgiving. The flight is a third full. Mm-hmm. There are 3 flight attendants, 2 in coach, 1 in first class. This gentleman is the last to buy his ticket. He sits in the last row by himself. He's wearing a black suit, white crisp shirt, black tie, neatly combed hair. Mm-hmm. He's carrying just a briefcase. Shortly after takeoff, he hands a note to Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant who's doing the last check through. At this point, flight attendants are hit on constantly. It is intentional. Oh, yeah. We'll get into that a little bit later too. But Florence, God love her, drops the note in her purse and is like, "You're welcome." Like walks away, doesn't even open it up. Goes to sit down next. It is. She sits down next to the other flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. Mm-hmm. The man in the back row signals to her. She comes and he says, "You better read that note." Oh. So she does. And the note says, "Miss, I have a bomb. You are being hijacked. Come and sit next to me."
Oh, my God.
I know. So she shows the note to Tina and goes and sits next to this gentleman who she quietly asks, God, Florence. We'll get to Florence is a great story. She asks to see the bomb. I know. So he opens the briefcase and she sees canisters, strings, dynamite, and he's got a little trigger under his thumb. And he says, I'm not going to be taken alive. Okay, but he's otherwise extraordinarily polite, very calm. He even offers to pay for his drinks. He orders a bourbon and soda. I know. He even tries to give her a tip. I know. So Florence tells the cockpit, here are his demands. He wants $200,000 ransom. He wants 4 parachutes, 2 front parachutes, 2 back parachutes, and he wants the plane refueled when they land in Seattle. The cockpit communicates this to the airlines and the FBI, who immediately like, yes, we'll do it. Okay. So they tell him it's going to take us a minute. The pilot tells the rest of the passengers, we have a small technical malfunction. Everybody sit tight. We're going to circle for a minute. Ends up being about 2.5 hours, which is a long time when your flight's only 30 minutes, but not that long to get a bunch of ransom shit together. Right. Yeah. Seems fairly reasonable. So they get it together. They tell him, we got it. They land in Seattle, far away from the rest of the airport. The rest of the passengers are allowed to disembark.
Do they have any idea anything's happening?
At this point, no.
And
none of the passengers.
Because they're weirdly out nowhere.
As a matter of fact, some of the passengers say they literally see the money handoff, and they're so far away and all these emergency lights, and that's the point when they're like, hang on a second.
That's what I was thinking. Wouldn't they be surrounded by cop cars?
Well, not really, because they don't want to make him nervous. And for one of the things DB Cooper did is he closed all the windows to the cabin so a sniper couldn't get him. They're also a little nervous because there have been a lot of hijackings in 1971. They were almost all Cuban nationals hijacking flights to get back to Cuba after the embargo. One of the pilots on this flight, William Scott, I don't think he was ever hijacked to go to Cuba, but he was like, they didn't seem that bad, actually. Like, the hijackers wanted to go to Cuba. So
Pretty nice guys.
fuck it. You take them to Cuba, you get a cigar.
Friendly. They gave us some rum and Coke.
You get home and everyone goes, ooh, you were hijacked. And you're kind of, it's like,
Little vacation.
But of course, that's an oversimplification. They were often dangerous. And just about a week before this one, the FBI had played hardball, said basically, no, we're not going to give you what you want. And the guy shot the pilot, shot his wife, shot himself. So they're ready to play ball with this guy. Florence stays off the plane. Tina Mucklow, the other flight attendant, takes the money back and she goes back. DB Cooper asked her to. She has spoken with him now a little bit. Yeah. And 2 of the pilots come back. So now on the plane, reboarded after the refueling, is Cooper, who never left the plane, of course, Tina, who brought him the money, and these 2 pilots. 4 of them. 4 of them, 4 parachutes. So once they get in the air, Cooper says, I want to go to Mexico. I want you to fly at 10,000 feet. I want you to put the incline of the wings up to 15 degrees. I want you to basically fly real low and real slow.
Whoa.
The pilots are like, okay.
If we fly, 727.
It's a 727. They're like, you fly that low and that slow, we have to refuel. We can't get all the way to Mexico. So they decide to refuel in Reno. DB Cooper says, great, fine. We'll refuel in Reno. Okay. They're starting to think, we got 4 parachutes, we're all going to jump. Yeah. The point is he's going to crash this thing into something and we're all going to jump.
Yeah, yeah.
Shortly after that, Tina sees him cut some of the cords off of one of the parachutes and tie the bag of money to his body. And he says, I want you to lower the aft stairs. Now, this is a very unique configuration of the 727. They have a staircase that lowers under the tail in the rear of the plane, not just where you and I are used to getting on the planes, it's next to the wing. It made it really useful for several things. One, you could get passengers on and off a plane without needing the staircase, the gangway. Right. You could land in a lot more places and get people on and off. And the CIA had used the 727 for Air America and various other espionage activities in Vietnam. So you could jump out the back.
My father, by the way, was heavily involved in, but
I want to know everything about that. In fact, but maybe your father was DB Cooper. Wouldn't that be fucking nuts? Okay. So that he says to Tina, I want you to help me lower these aft stairs. And she says, God love her.
And they're in the air?
They're in the air now, flying. Yeah. And the deal with being at 10,000 feet is it didn't have to pressurize the cabin. And she says, no. She's like, I'll get sucked out. Yeah. I can't do it. And totally, right? And he goes, okay, go. He goes, then go into the cockpit and lock the door and don't come back out. The last thing she sees is him tying the money to himself. The stairs, he lowers the stairs. Now, the cockpit, this is the timing now. So they take off from Seattle at 7:40. At 8 o'clock, the cockpit gets an alert that the staircase has been lowered. And they can hear it. Yeah. It's not an ambiguous thing when someone opens a door on an airplane, right? And at 8:13, the crew notes that there's a bump. They land with the staircase down, sparks and kind of crazy. Yeah. At 10:15, 2 hours later in Reno, and he gone. Now, here's what they have. Here's what they have on the plane. The only evidence left behind. He apparently took off his tie and his tie clip threw it. So there's the tie and the tie clip. Okay. He had 2 brandy sodas and he smoked a ton of cigarettes. He smoked a bunch of Raleigh cigarettes.
And he left
he left those cigarette butts and the glass. The FBI lost the cigarette butts. And none of the fingerprints they have 66 unidentified fingerprints, but they don't know who they are. Yeah. It could be people they don't. So whoever this person is, it's unidentified. Yeah. The note he took back to date, no body, no parachute, no bomb. Not for 9 years. Now, this is where we get into the only other piece of evidence that was found. So this took place day before Thanksgiving, 1971, in February of 1980 on the Columbia River, not really near the area they searched, which is called Vector 23. An 8-year-old kid named Brian Ingram is camping with his family, and his dad says, go clear some sand, make a fire. So you know how you put your like forearm down and like drag it back and forth to like make a nice flat kind of platform? While he's doing that, his forearm touches something, and he unearths 3 bundles of cash. And it is confirmed by the FBI to be the ransom, the D.B. Cooper ransom, because they made a note of all of the serial numbers.
Right,
and I didn't know, apparently a lot of banks and other institutions have ransom money set aside.
Oh, good to know.
I know.
Criminals, if you're out there.
They really got it. Really, they won't waste your time. That's on them. And so they knew exactly. They could confirm really quickly that it's made. So that is all. Now, that alone... The mystery of D.B. Cooper, with just that, what I've told you, the story of the guy who hijacks the plane and disappears. Immediate legend. This guy is John Dillinger.
Yeah.
Right? Robin Hood.
Yeah.
All rolled into one. He's nice. He doesn't
cool
hurt anybody.
Cool as a cucumber.
He's totally cool. I mean, you watch like
it's
the
like a
news.
James Bond kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. And when I say that this is history I'd like to fuck, when I fuck the history for my guests, I fuck the history. I read a book.
I can see the notes.
You can see my notes. I read a book. This book, by the way, I highly recommend. It's called Skyjack, The Hunt for D.B. Cooper by Jeffrey Gray. It is a particularly good, it's a bestseller. There's a lot of great books out there. This is a very nice definitive one. I watched 3 documentaries, the YouTubes. And here's one of the things about the mystery of D.B. Cooper that is so consistent. The mystery is fast. I mean, it's hard not to just be like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
And you find that really quickly, you either want to be him, find him, or fuck him. Exactly. Exactly. And from the get-go, people described him on the news
he's
that
such
night.
a folk hero.
Folk hero. They called him the patron saint of system fucking. And let's just also appreciate it's 1971, dude. We're tits deep in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And we're losing. And we know we're losing. The domestic problems in America do rival what we're experiencing now, almost exactly 50 years later. You've got riots and civil unrest, huge unemployment and layoffs. The airlines are laying people off. Wealth gaps are awful. Racial inequality. Stuff, and you have a desire by a large number of people to just stick it to the man. Yeah. And taking $200,000 from these goddamn airlines just didn't upset anybody, you know?
Right.
You know? And
the big corporation, wherever they go.
Or the big corporations, exactly right. So Northwest Orient Airlines, the airline at the time, you know, they ponied up. They had insurance, and it was kind of like whatever. So, I mean, they called him a master criminal. Even the FBI, I mean, agents of the FBI to this day say, no, we got to catch him. Got to catch him. But you can't fault a guy for a job well done. Like, that's really amazing. You know,
he planned it, right?
Well, now that's what's so fascinating. Now, before I go on with kind of the next part of the history and how this thing unfolded, I know that you were out of the country. And young. You would have been about 6. Did you have any information or understanding of this event as it took place at the time?
No, I didn't at all. I was pretty young, but I also probably wouldn't because, you know, news wasn't big like there. Sure. We'd have to you'd have to hear it on the radio.
When did you first become aware of D.B. Cooper? I know that you were from Minnesota, and Northwest Airlines is located in Minnesota. There's some lore about that. How did you hear about it?
Was there a song about it or something? Might have been the first. Was that? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think it was like, what is that? What song? And then I was like, who's, in passing, who's D.B. Cooper? And they're like, that guy that jumped out of. I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. Like, and then I probably maybe read an article, or also probably when the money was found. But you see it all. If I had LexisNexis and I did a search on it, like I'm sure it would pop up. Yeah. Like at least a few times a year and something. It's
so current. In fact, as I was doing research for this, talk about the most current, there's apparently an episode or an element of Loki. The series on Disney Plus follows the character Loki, where they imply that he's D.B. Cooper. Oh. That he was the one who stole the money and disappeared. Yeah. And this is what's so great is the mystery of D.B. Cooper in general and for very specific people. It's like everyone has a D.B. Cooper shaped hole in their life. Yeah. And the mystery is both compelling enough and ambiguous enough to fit just about whatever you want. So people who are conspiracy theorists, aliens, time travel have a way that why is D.B. Cooper
military people.
Military conspiracy. There's even people who, and you sometimes we, especially in 2021, God knows, the conspiracy theories are rampant. But there's people who are like, oh, it's completely turned around. It's the FBI did this because they wanted to implement stronger security for airports, and the airlines and the people had been so reluctant to it that they needed a big public event like this to get people behind change. And I was like, I would think that the guy shooting the pilot and his wife probably would have done that too.
Yeah, I think that was the big one. Yeah,
I'm not sure that one pulling one over on you guys was your big plan, but
and not hurting anybody,
not hurting anybody. And like I said, these young flight attendants who were used to, frankly, far more abuse from friendly flyers.
Friendly, really friendly.
And he really did try to tip them. They both said it twice. He kept trying to give them the change from his drink and just give them money, and they were like,
"Here's $2.
I know
you're gonna be you're hijacked.
Thank you, thank you, We
in case we make it.
I mean, but that's nice.
A cup of coffee.
That's nice. He also, for the layover, he demanded the money, the parachutes, the refueling, and meals for the crew. Meals for the crew. I mean, he's a nice guy.
Like a gun and a lasagna? I mean,
a bear claw and a cigarette. Like, what did you eat in 1971?
Garbage.
I don't know.
Spam sandwich.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cooper. How about $100,000? Anyway, but yeah, so totally nice guy. And the news is interviewing these girls, and they're like, oh, he just couldn't have been nicer. I mean, it doesn't.
They're a little
they want to fuck him.
Right?
Listen, who does?
Everybody
wants to fuck him. Now, I'm going to show you the picture of the sketches that came out to help us identify who he was. And one of the things that you'll see immediately is that it is man. Yeah. It is, if you had lowercase italics man in the dictionary, it would be this picture of D.B. Cooper. It's like if you traced your hand on a piece of paper and said, whose hand is this? That would have been
in this book that we're talking about, the Skyjack book, the picture that Dawn just showed me, it's the so-called Bing Crosby sketch. He looks like Bing Crosby. Then Bing Crosby with sunglasses. Then another FBI. And then, they aged him up, what he would look like. He looks like you would...
tell me that's not every guy you know.
You could never recognize. I mean, that looks like my Armenian neighbor that walks around the block 3 times a day.
Exactly. I mean, it was seriously everybody you've ever met. And so anytime that you start hearing about suspects, which is what we're getting into next, dude, I know. Whenever you start getting into suspects, they start with, well, my dad saw the sketch on TV and said, yep, that's Uncle Bobby. And I'm always like, skip. You're not fuckable. Just because you look like the sketch, like who doesn't? And yet, when I also don't take any of the suspects seriously unless Tina and Florence eyeball them. I'm like, Tina and Florence. These broads sat next to this guy.
Are they still alive?
They're both still alive. Fascinating stuff. So Florence, you want to talk about the little fuckable details. Yeah. So Florence, it's the day before Thanksgiving. Florence is almost off work. She's been on this holiday. These broad, they signed up to be flight attendants. They thought it'd be exciting. They'd see the world. And they're just getting grab-assed constantly. And there's also...
Constance, I remember flying on those planes, everybody smoked.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Everybody's smoking. And
they had to wear heels.
And here's, more than that. The airlines hired psychologists because planes crashed all the time. Yeah. And they were hijacked, as we are discussing, all the fucking time. Yeah. And people were terrified of flying. Yeah. And they were trying to figure out how to get people, and they behaved, what do we do to get people to be cool with flying? And the psychologists informed them distraction was the best, i.e. drugs and sex, right? So they literally, the drinks and the drinking and having inexpensive drinks was a huge part of it. And they very deliberately sold the flight attendants as sex objects.
Like Playboy bunnies.
Absolutely. They advertised that they would take off their coats. This is how the flight attendant will meet you at the door. She's wearing like a cute little coat. And this is what she'll wear during and they show her slowly undressing. There was American Airlines had a print ad of just the close-up of a woman's face, and she's like mid-orgasm, like eyes rolled back, biting her lip, just like full sex. And the text says, I'm gonna fly you like you've never been flown before. Miley, that you can fuck a flight attendant was implied in the advertising. God. It was what they did. So, and they had
were pretty hot back then.
They were hot, and they had weight requirements. You had to be hot. So this Florence
and age requirements. Limits. I should say.
So Florence had signed up. She was great. Got the job. Got spotted. They had spotters that would weigh you if they thought you were getting too heavy. She got spotted. They weighed her. She was over her weight, so they laid her off, prescribed her diet pills. And she had only recently gotten back to work. She was rooming with Tina, who's a born-again Christian who will not shut up about converting her to Jesus. And this is her last flight before she gets to go home for Thanksgiving and fucking die in a pile of mashed potatoes, okay? Florence now is alive. She's mentioned in this book. Jeffrey Gray, God love him, hunts them both down. Florence is very willing to talk, has a personal trainer, is apparently ripped.
Really?
She's like...
How old is she now?
She is like late 60s, early 70s. Tina became a nun.
What?
She became a nun. She does not. Now, this is what's so interesting. In this book that was published in, I think, 2011, she very flatly refused to talk to Jeffrey Gray. In fact, he, the author, at the time had a lead, a suspect he's pursuing. It's very dramatic, very mysterious.
Yeah.
And he knows that he really can't take this suspect seriously until, as I said, Florence and Tina were the only ones who saw him. And Florence was willing to take a look, and Tina he couldn't even get her to answer his calls. Because you can imagine, you're a celebrity. People are fans of yours. Yeah. You know how if you're the flight attendant who talked to D.B. Cooper, these weirdos are going to be constant.
And a total conspiracy theory.
Completely. And people do. They think that the reason she doesn't talk is because he found her and gave her part of the money. I mean, it's just like...
Yeah, nah.
And she's exhausted, but she doesn't want it. And there were a lot of copycats. And a lot of people got hurt pursuing a D.B. Cooper legend. And she said to the author, I just won't be a part of this journey anymore. The interesting thing is she does appear in a documentary a couple years later. So
after the book.
So she told Jeffrey to go fuck himself.
But she paid some money off the documentary.
She did. And the documentary is great.
I will give you. I don't know.
I'll give you all of my sources, listeners. You can go to our podcast and you can find links to all these documentaries. But she appears in a documentary, talks about it at length.
And then the pilot is a gal I know, and she knows him. Her dad was one of the pilots.
Anderson. I looked into him. He was the flight engineer, which is really specifically. And he's also in this documentary. He looks great.
Yeah.
The pilot and the co-pilot do come back on board after the ransom is given to them in Seattle. Anderson stayed behind. The flight engineer. That's my understanding. Some of them, there's some accounts that here and there where things missed, but that's my understanding, but he was certainly there. And, because we know that nobody was blown up, it's fine. But living in fear of blowing up the day before Thanksgiving is still not a picnic, however exciting it may have been. Now here's where people think, here's where we're at right now. The FBI closed the case in 2016. It is the only unsolved skyjacking in American history.
Wow.
And they did extend the statute of limitations so that if he ever is found, they can still charge him. But they have closed the case. There are no agents currently assigned to the D.B. Cooper case. They largely early on, and many people do believe he died in the fall. It was a really cold night. It was raining. It was dark. He's wearing a suit and loafers. And even at 10,000 feet, it's below zero up there for a minute.
Right.
Several other things. We say master criminal, so well planned. I mean, it's obviously meticulous. However, the evidence really shows this might have been a last minute actual idea because the person who he bought the ticket from at the counter before he boarded the plane, he asked, "Is this a 727?"
Oh, so
you know what I mean? Like that, I couldn't go. I kept going back and back to that. It was in this source. And I thought, God, that seems fucking weird. Also, part of the reason why they had such a difficult time searching for him was because of the variables of his fall. So, we talked about, he said to go to Mexico. And they said, well, we have to refuel in Reno. And he said, well, that's fine. He had trouble lowering the stairs. There's about 13 minutes there. He has to take all this time to tie the thing to his waist. He couldn't have known how long the refueling was going to take.
Right.
And it's really dark. And it's cloudy. So the idea that he could see light. So if he was...
And there was also stuff about where he was landing.
Yeah, if he
the
was
areas like brush filled and wasn't it?
Totally. Really difficult territory. Very, very close up. And if he was going to be liaisoning with someone, how in 1971 they could have predicted or communicated with each other is very difficult. Also, the FBI at first thought he must be a trained parachutist.
Yeah.
Obviously, this guy's military, skydive instructor, something like that. But then as more details came out, they found they're just not sure because the parachutes, they gave him 4 parachutes. And initially, the FBI apparently had considered giving him a booby parachute. If he had just asked, for example, 1 parachute.
Right.
There's a chance they would sabotage that parachute, something to it.
Something, yeah.
Which doesn't seem terribly right, but that was what they said. But because he asked for 4, and there were 3 passengers, they couldn't know which parachute might be used on whom, so they knew they had to give him. So it was an accident that one of the parachutes was a training parachute that couldn't open. And that any experienced skydiver would know. It had a tag on it. You could see certain things wouldn't open. And that was the chute he chose as his reserve chute. He took the booby parachute as a reserve chute.
Huh.
Of the two forward main chutes, there was a really nice, modern, sophisticated civilian chute and an older, not able to be steered military chute. And that's the chute he chose. So the
But
FBI...
if he's military, maybe he's familiar with that one.
And that's the other, right? So people are like, he took the one that was most familiar to him. So not only when he jumped exactly, how long he fell before he pulled the chute changed the search area and his possible landing area by hundreds of square miles. So that is simultaneously an issue for how they find him. People are, oh, what a master criminal. They'd never be able to find him. But in hindsight, you're like, maybe not a master criminal because he didn't exactly know where maybe he didn't know where he was going.
Who's going to pick him up?
And did he land in the water? And did he land wherever?
Yeah.
It's not far from Mount St. Helens. So that we never found a body, that we never found a parachute. Mount St. Helens erupted in 81?
Somewhere
Something like that?
Yeah.
So,
by the way, who the fuck in the FBI was willing to let one person just die?
that's what I know, right?
If they had to use the parachute, they gave him a training parachute?
They didn't know. That's the thing. The FBI didn't know either. It was crazy. They got him from a flight.
I mean, the guy only wanted 4 parachutes.
Listen, the FBI in this, also, where are the cigarette butts? They literally threw them away. Now, granted, it's 1971, so they didn't have the capacity to do DNA evidence. They wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah.
But now people come back, they're like, where are those cigarette butts? And literally some ass at the, did you want the glass? Like, no, we don't need them. I got the glass. The glass is right here. And actually, I think they took the glass too. Anyway, so yeah. But they didn't know that they had done the booby parachute. So who knows? So a lot of people think he died. But there's no evidence that he died, and it's not as much fun.
Yeah.
Not as much fun.
And
to
people
think about
always
him being
want
dead.
to treasure hunt the money, too.
Oh, yeah. I do.
Yeah.
Because as this kid, Brian Ingram, found, the actual value of the money that they found in Tena Bar on the Columbia River, Tena Bar, it's like a sandbar thing. People, of course, came down there with every fucking rake. It was like, get a rake! Get to the
metal detectors.
They never found anything else there. The money was valued. It was like $5,300 or something, like three bundles.
Did he keep it, the little boy?
He didn't, because the insurance company and the airlines fought this family and the kid. They finally gave him some, and when he was 14, he was able to auction them. So he made like $37,000 ultimately, being able to auction off
a couple bills.
But I was like, you fucks. It's like 1980 and this kid finds buried treasure. You fucks.
Yeah.
Let him have it.
Right?
Okay, so now I think that the DB Cooper mystery is really the two most interesting parts are the mystery itself, what happened that night, holy shit, and now the suspects.
Yes.
Ooh, Miley. Okay.
Is this foreplay?
This is foreplay. Yeah, your nipples. I hope your nipples are feeling things because mine certainly are. Okay. The FBI, like I said, it's closed the case unsolved, but they did pursue 1,000+ viable suspects. Wow. Because as we said at the beginning, everyone wants to be him, find him, or fuck him.
Right.
And there were thousands of deathbed confessions.
Really?
Thousands of deathbed
people
confessions.
that just needed to make up a story about their life.
Yeah.
So they mean something to
So hey guys, I'm DB Cooper, nighty night. And everyone goes, wait, what? You know? And it's because the mystery is so deep, you can neither confirm nor deny, right? So why not let them think that you're this interesting thing? So I'm going to tell you about 4 of my favorite suspects. Okay. Knowing that there are 1,000 that at least raise an eyebrow, and then I'll give you some honorable mentions at the end. So here's the first one, Richard McCoy, which is a great name, the real McCoy. I mean, come on. Yeah. This guy is a copycat hijacker. So a couple months after the DB Cooper hijacking, this guy hijacks a Northwest Flight airline, demands $500,000 cash, says he has a bomb, gets the parachutes, jumps out the back of a 727 and disappears. But only for about 5 days because his buddy, because his buddy from parachuting class is like, hey, FBI. My buddy Richard McCoy can't stop talking about how cool DB Cooper is. Said he figured he could probably do the same thing. Knows exactly how. Yeah. I'd look into him, and they were like, okay. And they went on down to Richard McCoy's house, and they found $499,000 stuffed in the attic, and they arrested him. He goes to jail and escapes that night.
What?
Escapes that night. They get him the next day. They literally go to the drunk tank to find him. He's gone. I mean, this guy is Dillinger.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
They arrest him again. He's in jail for a while. He works as a dentist assistant while he's in jail.
Oh, God, now what's this?
He makes a gun out of plaster. He carves a gun out of plaster.
Uh-huh.
He drives a garbage truck through the gate.
What?
He escapes again. And he doesn't get caught right away. He lives fucking large. He buys his daughter an Arabian horse. He gets an apartment in Miami with a friend, and they decorate it lavishly. He is ultimately tracked down and killed in his in the arrest. He's shot by the FBI.
Oh, I want to hear so much more of what he did with the money.
I know. He sat in a hotel, watched Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid because he robbed a bunch of banks after he escaped. I mean, Richard McCoy. Awesome. And this guy's a war hero. He was awarded the Purple Heart in Vietnam. He had gone in and saved comrades in Vietnam 10 or 12 times. I mean, I don't know if he's D.B. Cooper, but he's certainly fuckable.
Yeah.
And he also did it.
Yeah.
Like he hijacked a plane, jumped out the back. Like
Yeah.
he did it. The FBI agent who shot him, Nick O'Hara, says to this day, when I shot Richard McCoy, I shot D.B. Cooper.
Really?
However... So those are all the things you go, yeah, sounds about right, right? He had brown eyes. D.B. Cooper had blue eyes. No, other way. Cooper had brown eyes. McCoy has blue eyes. He never smoked in his life. No. And I think, for me, the biggest red flag that he was not D.B. Cooper is that he idolized him and never confessed.
Yeah, he would want to brag about it.
Yeah. Right? Why not?
To somebody, anyway.
To somebody. And I think that he was just impressed. Yeah. And inspired. I don't actually think he was.
It sounds to me like he may have had, like, a thrill seeker for sure, and like an adrenaline junkie. Because he's robbing banks and then saying, "I want to do that. See if I can do that too."
Yeah,
and nothing was enough. And then ending in a shootout. I mean,
yeah. I mean, like,
I think it'd be easier to disprove him than it would be to, right?
Totally. And that's the thing. They don't have now. They did find some DNA. They said. On the tie, the FBI has claimed they found DNA, and they have eliminated some suspects based on the fact that their DNA did not match. But a lot of people, you can imagine, there's a lot of quote-unquote people out there who like D.B. Cooper, and they argue that can't really be taken into account because who knows what this DNA sample is.
Yeah.
Like they found some in like the creases of the tie, but we don't know whose that is.
Yeah.
You know, so. Okay, so your second fuckable suspect is a guy named Duane Weber. Now he's the one I selected from the many deathbed.
Because he's better looking than the other guy.
He's better. He's really a lot taller. You know how I am
cute.
with tall guys. And a name like Duane. How can you go wrong? He's one of my favorite deathbed confessions.
Oh.
So Duane Weber's on his deathbed, and his slightly younger widow, his third wife, is with him, and he gestures her over, and he says, "I am Dan Cooper." And she doesn't know what that is. Right?
She's an idiot.
She's an idiot. Yeah.
She's like, great.
Okay, I'm
do you want a sandwich?
Meryl Streep. Yeah, I don't know. What do you want?
I'm Amelia Earhart.
So she doesn't know Dan Cooper. And this is, you remember I said the D.B. Cooper, Dan Cooper. So this is an early mistake in the thing. He signed Dan Cooper as his name when he got on board. Early on, when the FBI and the media, frankly, when the plane was still in the air, hours after, they're trying to find. So they're going around the city of Seattle and Portland looking for people with a history of bombs and robberies and hijacking. And they go to a guy named D.B. Cooper. They just go to his house because he lives in the area. His name is D.B. Cooper, and he has bombs and stuff. And they immediately eliminate him. Yeah. His alibis are tight. He's definitely not.
He has no legs.
But the media, he has no legs, and he's way too short. But the media picked up that they had gone to this guy D.B. Cooper, and so quickly lines cross, and they put D.B. And let's be honest, D.B. Cooper's a better name.
Yeah,
you know,
it sounds cooler.
Dan Cooper is still an important clue because years and years later, the FBI find that there is a comic book series that's only ever been printed in French. It's a Canadian comic book following the exploits of a parachutist named Dan Cooper. And he is an adventurous paratrooper. So that we were calling him D.B. Cooper instead of Dan Cooper may have actually moved us away from an important clue in terms of why did this man choose the name Dan Cooper as his alias. It could have been in honor of this French paramilitary paratrooper. Who knows? So Duane Cooper says, "I'm Dan Cooper," and he dies. Okay,
That's what you imagined happening.
That's what I meant.
That's not at all a fact.
And he was like, Cooper. Yeah.
And then he died.
And then, so his widow, very sad, sells all of his shit, as one does. And the person...
It is his third wife.
It's his third wife. And the person who buys his van calls her and says, "I found a wallet." Oh, in the van. Now, she looked in the places you sell at the glove compartment, little pockets next to the door. Where was this fucking wallet? It was under the seat. You know, it's kind of hidden in there. And in this wallet are a bunch of fucking IDs.
Different ones.
For not Duane Weber, for this guy, John C. Collins. This poor widow finds out that her husband, who just died, was an ex-con. Oh, he had served, wait until you hear about the list of prisons. He was in prison in Washington, Ohio, San Quentin, Folsom, and El Paso, among others. His crimes were always pickpocketing, thievery,
wow, you
fraud.
went to some bad prisons for doing pickpocketing. I mean, you'd think they
forgery.
just throw them in county.
You would, but who knows, repeated stuff. Anyway, so then she starts to remember, about 6 months before that money was found in the Columbia River, she had gone with him to some business convention in the area. He had left the hotel room for a while, came back all dirty and excited, then said Geronimo. Then when they left, they stop at the river. He takes a bag out and comes back, and she goes, "Where did you go? Where were you going with that bag?" And he said, "I put it in the river." And she's thinking he's a litter bug. So she's like, how dare you? That's not where we throw garbage. Again, all of this is coming together later. She says she remembers he took her past a wooded area, and he said, "That's where Dan Cooper walked out of the woods." And she was like, "Great. I don't know, anything." But she's recalling all of this stuff in hindsight. This poor widow has been on this wild goose chase with the FBI and with online sleuths to confirm or deny that her husband was D.B. Cooper, and she's bitter. You see her in documentaries. She's pissed.
Because she didn't even know his fucking name.
She's fucking mad. And people aren't nice to her.
Because she didn't know who she was fucking.
She knows. And but the only real, some of the yes and no's, the FBI says his fingerprints and his DNA do not match what they have. But again, nobody's convinced that the DNA and the fingerprints that they have are D.B. Cooper's anyway.
I'm sure they weren't well preserved at that point.
I also, one of the things that the widow says is a clue as to why she knew it was him, and that I disagree, I think it was actually probably disproven, is she goes to the library and gets a book on D.B. Cooper, like anybody does, try to figure out what the fuck's going on. And her ex-husband, has written notes in the margin. Oh. Which means he read it too, and I was like, that sounds like he did his homework. Yeah. I don't know if, it sounds like he really wanted to be deep. We want to be him, find him, or fuck him, right? And I think that, who knows. Yeah. Also, I wonder...
He wanted the notoriety somehow.
Yeah. And that he was sort of hiding things from her in general that she would like to attribute to this very interesting thing, but he's just a con artist. You're like, sorry, lady.
It's not as sexy.
Not as sexy. 2 suspects down, 2 to go. Hey, if you haven't already, head to @HILF Podcast on Instagram to see the D.B. Cooper sketch and pictures of Tina and Florence and all the suspects. You can also help out the show by giving us a rate and a review wherever you listen. And as always...
Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
Okay, so our next suspect, love this guy, Walter Reca. Now, he came out really recently in 2017, 2018 at the Cooper Con. And, people throw these big events every year. People dress like D.B. Cooper. They go to the bar where he turned up, wear the black suits. They Men in Black meets the Beatles, And they announced we think we got his name is Walter Reca. Walter Reca apparently told his best friend in the whole world, Carl Lauren, "I'm D.B. Cooper." They recorded a bunch of audio tapes where he detailed exactly how it happened, what happened, where he came out of the woods, what he did. And he notarized it and said, "You cannot release this until I die." He dies. This guy, Carl Lauren, finds documentarians and authors and stuff to try to get the story out. And they have really pushed that this guy, Walter Reca, is the guy. He was a Michigan parachutist.
Okay.
He had had some military background. He recorded all of these hours and hours of tapes, and some of the details have been corroborated. So one of the things that he said on the tape is, I walked out of the woods in this city of Cleum. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Cleelum, a city in Washington, small town. They walked out of the woods dripping wet, and a guy picked him up and took him to a diner. And that was where his liaison picked him up. Was from that diner. He didn't know the guy's name. He called him the cowboy. Some guy, a cowboy with a dump truck, picked me up, took me to the diner. It's just enough information that these documentarians who are trying to prove or disprove go and they find this fucking guy. He's a former cop. His name is Osidich. His last name is Osidich. And they find him just by his name and the brief description they have in the small enough town. They're like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I remember that guy. That happened. He said, I was driving my truck. The guy wanted a ride. I couldn't do it because it was my work truck. And I couldn't pick up a hijacker. So when we got to the diner, I said, I can't take you any farther.
Hitchhiker.
He said,
not hijacker.
Not hijacker. He didn't say hijack. Yeah. He was like, he rolled up his parachute. I didn't think anything of it.
I don't know what was happening.
Yeah, the hitchhiker.
Wasn't in the news.
And it wasn't. I mean, this was kind of far away. That's the part of the problem. So he says, well, can you give somebody driving directions here? Again, 1971. If he fell out the sky, he's like, I literally don't know where I am. So dude says, yeah. So he gets on the phone and he gave driving directions to this mysterious man's friend on the phone. And then he had a gig. He played guitar. So he went and played a guitar gig and never thought about it again until these documentarians found him and were like, we need you to corroborate the story. He's like, yeah, I remember that night. It was crazy. Crazy, right? So that has a lot of people raising their eyebrows. He had always dreamed of working for the FBI, CIA. And the idea... The story where it starts to fall apart for me is that this guy, Walter Reca, had a dream of working for the FBI, CIA, had tried to be in the FBI, CIA, and was denied a couple of times. He alleges then that he did committed the hijacking.
To prove it could be done.
And then they recruited him to be a secret agent and an assassin. That once they found out that he had done it, they found him and they said, if you don't want to go to jail for the hijacking, you now work for us. And just for me, every time I read Walter Reca's story, I go, I just don't think you wanted to be in the CIA and then they recruited you and you get to tell your best friend this whole story. I don't know.
Yeah, my dad was a spy, so...
I really am going to hear all about this. I can't wait.
So I'm just saying, like...
You're like, he didn't
I'm sure my dad would be like, yeah, no.
I don't think
he were
so,
still here.
buddy.
Like, John, I don't think so.
So this guy, Carl Lauren, writes a book, sells his book.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. It's not bad. I also really find with this guy, Walter Reca, he has all of these things. He has a really thick Polish Minnesota accent.
Like, that would be a thing, right?
I think the flight attendants would have noticed that. And he has all of this stuff. He says he knows, why not a $20 bill from the ransom? You know what I mean? Like, show us a 20. Anyone who has a piece of the ransom money, we're done talking. You're obviously him.
Yeah.
Or you met him. And so everyone talks about what happens there. All right. Now, this is my last suspect I'm going to tell you about, Maile. And I saved them for last because it's so fucking interesting. All right. This one is one of the leading suspects in just about everyone you meet. It's mentioned in this book and in several documentaries. And it is a suspect named Barbara Dayton.
Oh.
Barbara Dayton is the first transgender woman in the state of Washington in 1970. I didn't know that they had they called it gender reassignment. Now we call it gender confirmation, but it was the first sex change operation, as they called it at the time. Particularly fascinating because this individual, born a man, Robert Dayton, was a military vet, tattooed, rough, tumble, had gold mined in the Yukon, and had always identified as female internally and secretly. Describes in this book, Skyjacked, you can read some of Barbara Dayton's letters to the doctors advocating for why she should have the surgery. And she would say, I'm rough. If I am rough, it's because I had to be. I had to live as a man. And this is why I look and sound like this. And they were hesitant to do the surgery because they thought that she would have a very difficult time passing. It's fascinating. She military career, just like insane adventurous life.
Yeah.
In the early 80s, she, now living as a woman, Barbara Dayton, lives in and around Seattle, Washington, and she fixes up cars and planes. And one day, Pat and Ron Foreman know her, think she's a great mechanic, want to hire her to fix up their plane. They become friends.
Yeah.
They think she's really cool. They have her over for dinner. They play cards. And because they're all pilots in Washington, this area, every year around Thanksgiving, the D.B. Cooper story comes up,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And everyone's like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
It's the anniversary. And anytime that they would say something disparaging about D.B. Cooper, like, what an idiot.
Barbara.
Barbara would speak up. Would get very defensive about it. And one day, sort of kidding around, Ron Foreman says, I know what it is, Barbara. It's because you're Cooper. You're D.B. Cooper. And she gets pissed.
Oh.
And she, pulls him aside and is like, don't ever say that again. I know. So then they have dinner another couple nights later, and they've got some friends over, and they're talking about D.B. Cooper, and he goes, and she confesses. They have her comb her hair. They take a picture. She comes out also as a transgender woman. She says at the time to these two, really, you see the documentary, you see their interviews. They're just the sweetest, nicest, down-to-earth people. And she apparently said, I think your wife knows what's going on here. And this guy, Ron Foreman's like, what? What do you mean? And she's like, she's a transgender man. And he was like, what? I mean, he had no idea.
Oh, really?
Ron was completely taken by surprise.
It's like, I like this.
And you're like, wait, so you're a transgender woman and you're D.B. Cooper?
Right.
Like, what a night.
Bonus.
So she had a grudge against the airlines, and that is one of the key things. Tina Mucklow apparently asked D.B. Cooper during the hijacking, why are you doing this? Do you have a grudge against the airline? And he said, quote, I don't have a grudge against the airline, miss, but I do have a grudge. So the people have been interpreting that, of course, over the last 50 years. But this fits if she had a grudge. She thought that the big airlines were bumping out little pilots. Pilots like her and her friends who were had these little planes, were constantly being moved out and bumped and treated badly.
Yeah.
And the big commercial airlines, the bigger they got, the less you could be a recreational pilot. So that was apparently one of her grudges.
Interesting.
She was apparently destitute and broke up until the date of the hijacking, and all of a sudden she seems very happy and she has money again. They also imply part of the reason why she was able to disappear was because she put a wig on and lived as a woman. So this was the hijacking happened after her sex change operation. Right. The idea being that she dressed as a man to commit the hijacking and then went back to living as a woman. Mm-hmm. I know, it's fascinating.
Now, did she get to meet Tina? Did they get an ID on her?
No. And that is really also where poor Barbara Dayton also falls short. She's too short. She has blonde hair, as a man or a woman. She had blonde hair, and Cooper had definitively dark hair. And again, you suspect the women would have noticed if it was a real bad dye job or it looked or smelled like it was a wig. She had blue eyes. Cooper had brown eyes. And the ransom, there was never any discussion really of what happened with the money. She never really explained why she was still so broke. But Barbara Dayton. Now, the honorable mentions go on. We've got Kenny Christiansen. He was a Northwest flight attendant for years and years. He said on his deathbed that he had a secret he had to tell. And people thought because he was a flight attendant for Northwest and he had a grudge and he lived all these secrets, I think he was gay. Yeah. I think a lot of
to me, it sounds like
like he was gay. And even when you read the more details, they were like, he lived in a house with 3 other guys. and he was a flight, and and we don't know what his big secret was.
Florist.
Exactly, and you're reading through the history
and he really loves,
Oh, I know, and these sleuths
Mario
are like,
Lopez.
we found a secret. We found a hole in his attic where he could have hidden money, and you're like, go home.
Yeah,
go home. L.D. Cooper, another great suspect. His niece, 8 years old at the time, was seeing all of this strange thing. Her 2 uncles were acting really weird, and they said they were going on a big turkey hunt on the day before Thanksgiving, and then they come back that night bloody, and her dad is freaking out, and he says something about, we did it, we hijacked that plane, and she's like, what? And they kind of send her out of the room, and then that uncle disappears. They never see him again, and she asks about him all the time, and when she's an adult, she finally says, Dad, what happened to Uncle LD? And he says, well, don't you remember? They hijacked that plane.
Oh.
And she's like, what? So she's been in and out with the FBI. They chased that down. There's a guy, a former parachutist named Rackstraw that people think is him because they've broken the code. You know, people were writing letters to the newspapers claiming they were D.B. Cooper. And so people have taken all of these letters and tried to decode them to try to figure out who it is. I mean, talk about a rabbit hole. And one of the conclusions of this book, Skyjack, is that he calls it a curse. That if you really, really start to feel like you've got a lead on D.B. Cooper, it is a long ride down a deep hole, man, and you are going to get sucked
and all
in.
the possibilities might be possible, right? In some way.
And now if you really want to get into it, this is the 50th anniversary.
Oh, is it?
November of 2021 is exactly 50 years.
Oh, so that should be a good thing.
Yeah, that is. So there's a bar in the middle of fucking nowhere near this search area. It's called the Ariel Tavern and Store.
Can we go there?
Can we go there?
Can we go
That's
there?
my question, Miley. Will you go with me?
Yeah.
I mean, why not? I mean, I dress up like D.B. Cooper. You can be Barbara Dayton.
Or one of the shorter guys.
guys.
That short guy. The first one.
And we will just
Oh my God. Can you imagine? I'm sure they just get overwhelmed. They'll probably be, I'm sure it'll be on national news. They'll probably have to have tents and stuff.
That's what I'm hoping. I feel like maybe the HILF podcast can get them just overwhelmed with people.
What's the name of the bar?
It's called the Ariel, like the mermaid. And it's the city in Washington. And it is like, when you look it up on a map or you try to because I was like, I want to get myself there.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
It's the middle of nowhere. It's like, you drive up to Albert Lee.
Yeah.
And people are like, consider Albert Lee the city. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Like it's gonna be nuts. So they said somebody had they had done it for years and then they canceled it and they stopped doing it. And I'm like, well, they're gonna have to. Yeah. This is gonna be a Field of Dreams situation.
Well, I'm surprised that I go to a lot of Comic Cons because of my cartoon. I'm surprised that they don't have a DB Cooper Con.
They do.
They do.
They have this DB Cooper
They must
Con.
be doing a big deal this year.
I would hope so. Yeah, well, they do every year. This year I did read the DB Cooper Con. I don't remember if it's around that same time, if it's that Thanksgiving time. They have sleuths. They often will bring Florence, if they can find her, the author of this book. Tina, I don't think Tina goes anymore, but every once in a while Tina. There's the FBI detective Hemmelschleck. You know, he was the guy who got the call to go that night. He's been he very specifically gets very upset when you say that he's obsessed and his wife left him and he's a little
his wife left him.
His wife left him and he goes and he calls DB. He's the one who calls DB Cooper a scumbag, low life criminal. He's still got.
He's
this,
he doesn't think he's cool or fuckable at all.
No, he'd fuck him, but out of anger, out of pure revenge. So they come up and they talk on panels. The kid, Brian Ingram. Yeah. He will often, the kid who found the ransom money, he will show up.
I gotta go to that con. My cons are big, but that one sounds more interesting.
I know, right? I know, I'd go. Listen, we'll update you, listeners, on if Miley and I do a Muppet-style road trip up to Washington.
Oh, my God, that'd be so much
Wouldn't that be fun? That'd be a beautiful drive.
Yeah.
We could do it. And halfway.
And rent a car.
Or we fly there and halfway there, we fucking jump out the window. They'll never see it coming. They'll never see it coming. Well, that has been
awesome.
Our DB Cooper history. I'd like to fuck. Miley, thank you for joining us and for giving me such a great assignment.
Now, of course, you've got me in the wormhole. Mm-hmm. It's just something I've always thought was kind of interesting, but really didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh my God, now do I have to go down the, I do, right? For me, that your research is impeccable and it makes me want to just go, okay, now we need to do more research.
Oh, well, thanks. Listen, this is my excuse. I don't want to do something really hard, like get a master's degree in history. But I also love history too much that I read all this interesting stuff and then nobody ever asks me if I know it.
So you have to have your own podcast.
So I have to have my own podcast so I can prove I know the things I've read.
All you have to do is take what you just did with me and go pitch it as a road movie. Where these two chicks obsessed with DB Cooper take a trip up, pick up someone on the way that's a real weirdo.
Yeah, and it turns out to be
DB Cooper.
He'd be 90. I'd still fuck him. Mr. Cooper, lay down. I mean, get up. Oh, man.
Is it DB? Do you want me to call you DB?
DB Dan. What is it here?
What's happening?
Oh, my God. Well, Miley, I got to go. Hey, thank you so
you.
much. And we'll see you on the road.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
If a road movie or even a road trip materializes, of course, you'll be the first to know. Unfortunately, at last look, the Ariel Tavern appears to have officially ended their DB Cooper days. But we do have a link to them on our Instagram if you want to watch out for future events. On the other hand, the annual DB Cooper Con in Portland is alive and well and will likely only get better over the next 50 years. Thanks again to my guest, Maile Flanagan, and thanks to you for listening. In the next episode, I sit down with comedian Meryl Klemo and an unlikely HILF. Her favorite president, but one of the ones you're most likely to forget, James K. Polk. I was a skeptic at first, but we start with his mullet and we end with a case of mysterious gold. Believe me, it is an H you're going to want to F to. Until next time, this has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party and everybody's coming.